Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm great, Brian. I don't know. I thought you and I might get together and do another show.
Let's do it, Matt. We're both here. We might as well do another edition of HorseCenter. There are people watching that want to see HorseCenter every week, and this week it's going to be all about Songbird, Matt. Of course, we know the great mare, the great 4-year-old daughter of Medaglia d'Oro, and Ivana Vinalot has been retired recently. She's going to be offered up at the Fasig-Timpton November breeding stock sale. She'll be the star of a sale that's just loaded with great mares. But we wanted to look back today at the wonderful career of the two-time champion, Matt. It all began back in July 26th of 2015. Jerry Hollendorfer, Fox Hill Farm, had a $400,000 yearling purchase to unveil in a maiden special weight at Del Mar.
Yeah, they certainly did. I don't know if we can say, because Songbird went off at the highest price of her career, $2.20 to 1, if she was a secret, I guess, relatively speaking. She was not the favorite in the race, but Mike Smith was up, and Songbird did her thing and won that first race by 6.5 lengths. The great race caller Trevor Denman unleashed magnificent 3 times in his description of the race.
Not bad for a maiden special weight career debut. Yeah, she was actually not the favorite. We forget that, but at 2 to 1, I think the secret wasn't too well kept, that this filly had a ton of talent. And then, of course, the talk she got after that July 26th maiden race a couple years ago, it came fast, and people were impressed with what they saw in the race, what they were seeing in the mornings. And Jerry Hollendorfer took no time to move his new star 2-year-old filly right into stakes competition. In fact, it was Grade 1 company. It came about 5 weeks later, the Grade 1 Del Mar debutante. She was actually pressured just a little bit by a very good female sprinter in that race, Matt. But again, just like her maiden race, she proved too good. Grade 1 winner after just 2 starts.
She certainly did. And like, as you were saying, Brian, she ran against what's turned out to be a very good Bob Baffert horse in Pretty and Cool. Pretty and Cool made Songbird work early on, but as we certainly got to be accustomed to see, coming around the turn and into the stretch is the time when Songbird did her thing, and she drew off to over a 5-length victory in this race.
Yeah, and then just 3 weeks later, Matt, it was the progression of the big juvenile filly races out in California, so she came right back for another Grade 1, this time back up north a little bit from Del Mar in the Grade 1 Chandelier Stakes. She stretched out a little bit in distance, and again, really no contest, showing her class, showing her ability to come back quickly. And I think by the time we got to the Breeders' Cup, there were a lot of good fillies. Obviously, the best 2-year-old fillies in the country were there at Keeneland. So Songbird left Southern California for the first time, came to Keeneland, and really proved that the other fillies were running for second place. She was just heads and tails better than all the good fillies that were in that race.
She certainly did. She answered all the questions that anybody could come up with at that point. Could she travel across the country? Could she run in a more Eastern style track at Keeneland? Could she beat other talented horses? Let's not forget Rachel's Valentina was in there, who had not done anything wrong in her career up to that point and was a very talented horse. And like you said, Brian, Songbird answered every question. She was sent off at 60 cents to the dollar there and drew off to another relatively appearing easy victory by more than 4 lengths.
Yeah, it was easy, Matt. It was coasting, and that's what she did her entire 2-year-old season. 4 races within just over 3 months, she clearly became a champion. She was awarded the Eclipse Award for Champion 2-year-old filly of 2015. it was obvious there was no one else in contention. Rachel's Valentina was looking like the best 2-year-old filly on the East. And like you mentioned, really had no answers for Songbird as they straightened out down that Keeneland stretch on Halloween of 2015. Some good things here that we saw. Not only was she dominant in Southern California, Matt, the fact that the Breeders' Cup was away from Southern California made us believe that perhaps Songbird was not just your really good 2-year-old filly who kind of ran through the season a little bit. She could be more than that, proving that she could take her show on the road, came to Keeneland, 2 turns, and it was dominant. So no surprises that she was the champion 2-year-old filly by a long way. And then she was ready at 3. There's still doubts. Especially with fillies, wondering how they're going to come back the next year. It didn't take long for us to see, because early February, formerly a Grade 1 race, the Las Virgenis was a Grade 2 by then in 2016. And again, we saw what this filly was all about. Now as a 3-year-old in the Las Virgenis, Songbird, easy.
Yep, Songbird, easy. And I think one of the things that you said is important to note and will be important to keep in mind as we continue with their career. That was that she did have a relatively short break in the winter, just from November to the very beginning of February. So just a few months off. And again, we started to see in the Las Virgenes what we would see for most of the year with Songbird. She just toyed with the field. She'd come around the turn, and by the time they hit the top of the stretch and the stretch call in the charts, Songbird had opened up a big lead, and then Mike Smith would basically coast home with her.
So now we start talking about maybe another great Medaglia d'Oro filly from a few years before, Rachel's Alexandra. And I think there's a lot of things, both physically and the way they raced in common. Rachel Alexandra, of course, you know, I would rate her as probably the best 3-year-old filly that I ever saw, and I still remember Ruffians, so that's saying a lot. And Songbird looked a lot like Rachel Alexandra in plenty of ways. Again, physically in the way she raced. She had the speed to kind of be wherever she wanted to be, usually on the lead in these races. And it was just a high cruising speed. It looked like she was just galloping around the track. And then if anybody tried her on the turn or early in the stretch, she had all the answers. We saw it again in her second race of her 3-year-old season. Also at Santa Anita, that was the Santa Isabel. And then after those 2 non-Grade 1 races, she quickly came right back to Grade 1 racing. I think it's interesting to see that after her career debut, she had a debut in a maiden race, and then everything was graded stakes after that. The next 14 races, most of them Grade 1. And then the third race of her 3-year-old year, the April 9th, I believe it was, the Santa Anita Oaks, more of the same. Now she was 7 for 7 after that Santa Anita Oaks, Matt, and we knew we were looking at something special by that point.
Certainly, and she had become a huge fan favorite, a huge betting favorite at that point. Those 3 races at Santa Anita, she went off at a nickel to 1, a dime to 1, and then a nickel to 1 again. You know, when you're 5 cents to 1, you could be even less than that. That's as low as the odds show up in the chart. So and her performances every time, that's the way you want odds-on favorite to win those races. Never a doubt any step of the way about the outcome.
Never a doubt. So 3 for 3 early in the season at Santa Anita. It looked for the world that Songbird would take her show to Kentucky Derby weekend. All along, people were wondering, is this the filly? We knew she had the talent, of course, to run in the Kentucky Derby. Was this the filly to become the first filly to win a Kentucky Derby in nearly 3 decades? That was never going to happen. Rick Porter of Fox Hill Farm didn't need to push his filly, and certainly the trainer, Jerry Hollendorfer, really didn't want any part of the Kentucky Derby for his undefeated filly, 7 for 7. So it was decided that the Kentucky Oaks would be the route, but unfortunately, because that probably is the most prestigious race these days for fillies restricted to 3 years old. She did not make the Kentucky Oaks at Churchill Downs on the first Friday in May last year.
Yeah, no, she did not, Brian. And as it turned out, she didn't have a lot of time off when she missed the Oaks. She was able to come back in June at Santa Anita and win the Summertime Oaks, which was a Grade 2. That's the last time that Songbird would run in a race that was not a Grade 1 event.
That's right. After a big win in the Santa Anita Oaks and a little bit of an illness forcing her to miss the Kentucky Oaks, she came back. I guess it was just a little over 2 months, June 18, the Summertime Oaks. And we saw the old Songbird. She didn't miss a beat from that short break. And from there, once again, just like she did in 2, they weren't afraid to bring her east to face other 3-year-old fillies. And there were some fillies that people were talking about east. By that time, Karina Mia had impressively beaten the Oaks winner, Catherine Sophia, at Belmont. So Karina Mia was the up-and-coming 3-year-old filly on the East Coast. We saw what she could do against Songbird that summer. Saratoga became kind of a showplace for the 3-year-old filly Songbird as she ran in successive Grade 1 races in July and August last year at Saratoga.
Yeah, if there were any doubts that people had, and naturally people were looking for reasons that maybe Songbird could be challenged, and you brought up Karina Mia, who was having a fantastic campaign and running at Saratoga, where big favorites and champions sometimes go down to defeat. Those races at Saratoga, first in the Coaching Club American Oaks and then in the Alabama, really upped her stardom even further, because now so many fans in the East were on her bandwagon, and she became a national star now.
A national star. She beat her top competition among the 3-year-old fillies easily. Then the Alabama, I still wondered, what she would look like at a mile and a quarter. A mile and a quarter at Saratoga can be more demanding than other places for sure. And that Alabama, again, was something to see, something special, just a dominant performance. I remember the Romans filly. Her name is escaping me right now. Tried to go with Songbird early, and that did not end well for that filly. And Songbird was just a dominant winner at 10 furlongs, the classic distance. We weren't going to see her against colts, but the specter of top older mares, and really top older mares, was coming. But first there was the business of a 7-figure race down in southeast Pennsylvania at Parks, the Grade 1 cotillion. Again, Karina Mia tried her there. No letdown, no bounce from those big races at Saratoga, a mile and a quarter Alabama. She came right back to the cotillion, and I was impressed again. Not the first time, but I was as impressed with Songbird as I had ever been when she just dominated the cotillion down at Parks.
She certainly did, and again, it was not an easy field. Karina Mia was in there, Catherine Sophia was in there. 2 of the top 3-year-olds, another new track on a surface at Parks that, again, sometimes some horses don't like, but she was amazing. Nothing fazed her. No different racing surface fazed her. Different competition, and again, she won easily at 30 cents to the dollar and drew off to another victory. These are all signs of great horses, Brian. You and I have talked about it before. The ability to travel, the ability to win at different race tracks around the country. Those are calling cards of the great ones.
The great ones, and 11 straight wins to begin her career, 10 straight graded stakes wins. And Matt, through those 11 wins, clear, far and away the best 2-year-old filly in the country in 2015, far and away, maybe even more so, the best 3-year-old filly of 2016. She never was really tested in any of those races down the stretch. She was just too good for a competition. That was going to change. That was going to change in the very next race, because finally she would step out of her division. It would come on November 4 at Santa Anita. The Breeders' Cup Distaff probably was the best race of the year last year, Matt. It brought together really good older mares. Stellar Wind was in there. Forever Unbridled was in there. And of course, the multiple champion, the multiple Breeders' Cup winner, Beholder, the older mare, was in there. She had missed the Breeders' Cup Classic the year before, but she was healthy and ready for a matchup with Songbird in the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year. And like I said after the cotillion, and I said that wasn't the first time that I thought Songbird impressed me more than ever. It happened for the third straight race in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. This time it was a losing performance, but I thought Songbird ran brilliantly in the Breeders' Cup Distaff.
Oh, Brian, she was a warrior in there. Again, the race, she ran her race. She used her speed. She was on the lead. And you can't emphasize the quality of that field. One of the greatest fields assembled for the distaff ever, with Beholder and Forever Unbridled, star of 2017, Stellar Wind, still a star in 2017. It was just a fantastic field, and what a stretch drive, what a photo finish. It's called a nose, but when you look at the picture at the end of the race, it's a whisker, it's a hair maybe on the nose of those two horses. Beholder, just a phenomenal mare, and to lose by that narrow margin, I guess you call it a defeat, but like you said, Brian, tremendous performance.
Yeah, I forgot about I'm a Chatterbox, who was a really nice Grade 1 quality mare, out close to the pace early as well in that race. It was one of the greatest Breeders' Cup distaffs for sure that we've seen in the history of the Breeders' Cup. And I thought Beholder might have had a few advantages in there. She had tough races before. She certainly had been a more battle-tested horse by that point in her career. She, of course, was twice the age, 6, and she was still at the top of her game. She also had the advantage maybe of being outside. Songbird, of course, set the pace, and Beholder stayed close and then moved on her early in the stretch, and then just an epic stretch duel. And Beholder was a super deserving winner, a great mare who ran one of the best races of her career that day at Santa Anita to get by Songbird. But Songbird really, truly ran a fantastic race. And like you mentioned, Matt, the margin of that victory for Beholder, loss for Songbird, her first in a 12-race career at that point, was as narrow as could be without being a dead heat. Matt, after 11 straight wins, we I guess there becomes a point where we put a little line through Beholder's career, because her next 4 races, starting with that Breeders' Cup Distaff, she only won 2 of the 4. 2 wins, 2 narrow seconds in those 4 races. There were two halves to this great career, but it's hard to take anything away from any of those last 4 races, even after as good as she looked in the first 11. Again, that high cruising speed. Maybe she has a longer stride than the average horse or even the Grade 1 stakes winner. Maybe that's what made Beholder so great, and maybe that's why she ran such a great race in a losing effort. It was Zenyatta-esque, frankly. Zenyatta, of course, came to the Breeders' Cup Classic, her second Breeders' Cup Classic, with an undefeated record. I felt like I was never more respectful of what Zenyatta can do until she lost that narrow defeat to Blaine. Felt the same way about Songbird. And the good news, Matt, after being the again an Eclipse Award winner, second-time champion, is that she was coming back at 4. It didn't happen until June of this year, but it was in a Grade 1 race. Paid-up subscriber, by the way, was getting really good at this point. And Songbird, after the long layoff, after close to 8 months off, came back and won on Belmont Stakes Day.
Certainly did. And you know, I think it's worth noting and emphasizing what you said, that it was a much longer layoff going into this year than going into her 3-year-old season, where it was just a few months. This was, this was an over 6-month layoff. So there were some, as we found out and found out more, there were some little problems that Songbird had over this layoff. But she came back in the Ogden Phipps, big favorite again, and her performance was a little bit different than those 3-year-old races that we were accustomed to. That huge burst of speed coming around the turn, that opening up by 7, 8, 9 lengths going into the stretch. That was different. We didn't see it here. She got the lead, but she wasn't able to extend the lead. When she went into the stretch, she was only up by head and ended up winning the Ogden Phipps by a length. So that was different for Songbird.
A little different, Matt, but I think as a return race, nearly 8 months off, and I think paid up subscriber was getting really good. She won her next race by more than 30 lengths before getting injured. I think it was a very good return race. It might not have been quite the same what she was doing to 2-year-old fillies and 3-year-old fillies, but this is a very good older filly she faced at Belmont after such a long layoff, and nothing wrong with that return race. But then we get to the Delaware handicap in mid-July, and this is a race that worried me a little bit. This was 1.25 miles again, but this time she didn't face the kind of fillies she faced in the Phipps, or the kind of fillies she faced in the Phipps. There was no paid-up subscriber there. Martini Glass ran second to Songbird in the Delaware handicap.
Yeah, Brian, and the result of the race was another Songbird victory, but it played out kind of similarly to the way the Ogden Phipps played out. Except in this race, Mike Smith really had to work her hard, really had to ask a lot of her coming around the turn into the stretch. We were used to just the ease with which she exploded at that point, but he really, really had to ask her to work, and coming down the stretch continued to need to ask her to work. And there was doubt all the way down the stretch about the victory. She did pull off and win by a length, but at no point was I confident that, this is going to be easy.
Right, and this time it wasn't against the kind of competition that she had been facing in her last few races. So there now the question was raised, well, is this quite the same Songbird? Having said that, she was good enough to win a Grade 1 off a long layoff. She was good enough to win a Grade 1 at 1.25 miles, giving a lot of weight away. So when good things were coming out of the Songbird barn, that she was flourishing again, heading into the Personal Ensign, I think everybody was ready to see Songbird again take a step forward, and she probably did, Matt. The Personal Ensign, although it became only the second race of her career, second loss of her career, probably was a stronger race than certainly the Delaware handicap, maybe the Ogden Phipps as well. She ran a very good race, but Forever Unbridled was a methodical rallier down the stretch, and again, one of the best older fillies in the country, really good older mare, 5-year-old mare. She could not hold her off at Saratoga in the Personal Ensign.
No, she couldn't. And like you said, Forever Unbridled is an excellent horse, and we will look forward to seeing her in the distaff this year as one of the main contenders in the race. But like you said, Brian, it just seemed like, again, coming down the stretch and around the turn, that Songbird wasn't giving what we were used to, and you could see Forever Unbridled coming with just a strong and steady closing move, and was able to go by Songbird for victory.
Right after the race, Rick Porter said that it just didn't seem like the same Songbird. He wanted to check her out. She was taken to Root and Riddle for a full exam. They found issues in both hind legs, both hind ankles, where there was deterioration there, and they made the decision that it was time. It was time to not risk anything worse, certainly happening to Songbird, and she was retired after the Personal Ensign. Matt, 15 races, 13 wins, 2 narrow losses, one to Beholder by a whisker. the other in her final race to Forever Embroiled, where she obviously wasn't quite 100%. Matt, she won nearly $4.7 million in those 15 races. She won Grade 1 races. She won 9 of them, most of them not close. I have no doubt that she is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Oh, no question about that, Brian. What is it? Is it a 5-year wait for after retirement, Brian?
That's right. It's 5 years after retire, so she'll be up for the Hall of Fame in 2022.
Yeah, no doubt she will be a first-time, a unanimous, probably number one in the vote total in that class. And I became a huge Songbird fan. I feel like I was so lucky to have been able to see her run in person 4 or 5 times, including both Breeders' Cup races and the race at Parks and up at Saratoga, and to see her at the barn up there in Saratoga a good bit. I was really lucky to be able to see a wonderful, charismatic, brilliant filly like Songbird.
Same here, Matt. Credit to racehorses everywhere, and one of the best fillies we've seen in years. Songbird, 2-year-old champion, 3-year-old champion. She won't be a champion this year. She might have been if she stuck around, or if she, of course, was 100% healthy. Songbird took Fox Hill. Her owner, of course, Rick Porter, has been suffering through health issues. It looks like he's coming out the better side of his battle with cancer of late, so that's good news. Jerry Hollendorfer, of course, has had numerous great horses, top horses, and Songbird is right up there with the best of them. Now she goes to Keeneland, the Fasig-Timpton November breeding stock sale, and there's a lot of good older fillies and mares being sold at that time, but I think Songbird is the star of that show.
No question, boy. I'm going to be watching when Songbird goes into the sales ring to see that kind of excitement. Brian, I don't know. I got like $25 extra in my wallet. You're down there. You want to put some money together, see if we can get her?
Matt, you're about 10 million short, I think, with those $25. So I'm not even going to touch that one. Folks, we hope you enjoyed this show. This show's a little different than we do most weeks. The tribute to Songbird, her marvelous career of a fantastic champion. She's retired recently, and HorseCenter, Matt and I and Brett wanted to wish Songbird a happy retirement and thank her for everything she's done for us fans and for racing the last 3 seasons. We'll be back next week with a new show. I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. And Matt, can I get a parting shot from you, sir?
Yeah, like you said, doing a tribute to a horse like Songbird is the reason that you and I do HorseCenter, Brian. It's because we love racing so much, and we love wonderful stars of racing that do so much like Songbird. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for his great producing.
Well said on both accounts, Matt. Folks, thank you for watching another episode of HorseCenter. We will see you next week.